Here we go. Good afternoon. Good morning, everybody. It is Monday, and my name is Jason Flame. Welcome to the Master Motivation Podcast. Once again, I am all fired up and can't wait to introduce you to our guest today, Shihan Dana Abbott. His expertise is in Kenjutsu, known as Japanese swordsmanship, where he studied in Japan for 15 years during the Showa era. Upon arrival in Japan, he enrolled in Nihon Taiiku Daigaku. Hopefully, I said that right.
That sounds okay to me.
Good. Japan's esteemed martial arts university, where he learned Kendo in all its applications. All his training and certification was through the Japanese Department of Education and Recreation. Shihan Abbott, seventh Dan, has written and published 5 books, designed a U.S. patent, created the ActionFlex product line, and started a completely new niche in the martial arts industry. Shihan Abbott is a Black Belt Hall of Fame inductee and has conducted seminars in over 30 countries. Abbott holds the esteemed rank of Shihan, which he obtained at the Hombu dojo in Yokohama, Japan. Welcome to the show, sir. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
This is amazing. It's going to be fun. It's Monday. I love to start it off with interviews with some fantastic and amazing people in the martial arts industry, as well as many other industries. But being a martial artist myself, I love to talk to other martial artists about your experience, your background, and I'm sure you've got some great stories to tell us. So if you can quickly just, tell us a little bit about how you went to Japan for your first time, how you got involved in martial arts.
Well, my name is Dana. That started in grade school. So just basically, it kept, here I am already stuttering. So you just bring back the childhood, and there I am stuttering with a girl's name. That's what got me into martial arts. But I dabbled in it back in 1964 at UC Berkeley. I had an older brother, and he was practicing judo there. And for about a semester and a half, couple of semesters, he threw me down the stairs, and that I learned how to fall, and that worked out really nicely. But after that, I didn't really touch martial arts until about the 1970s, when Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris and all those guys got around. And I
Mhm.
was high school, and then when I got out of college in 1978, I moved up to a small little town in Prescott, Arizona. I became a surveyor for the county and with the engineering department, and had 8,100 square miles of Cowpie County to survey, which was really good because I didn't have to deal with people, and I was always in the pines. And like Sedona and all those beautiful places, that's where
Mhm.
I got to work, which was really nice. During that time, I met a guy. This is a small town, Bob the dog catcher. And basically, he says, we're doing martial arts at the Police Athletic League over at the old Armory. So I said, oh, well, show me something. So he showed me a combination punch kick. This is over a couple of beers. And I went, ho, ho, ho. So next week or so, I was practicing 2 times a week at the Police Athletic League's gym, basically, and just getting beat up by cops who couldn't stretch. And that worked out really well. And, everybody knows Prescott, Arizona by those, what would we say? Remember the movie Billy Jack?
Mhm.
Well, the more famous movie that was all done in Prescott, Arizona. So the big fight on the courtyard or the court scene, that area, that was just a short walk from where I lived.
Hmm.
So from there, I met a few interesting individuals. One, though, in particular, his name was Toby. Uh, he was like one of those one of those old Vietnam vets that never really came back home, and he spent a long time in Korea before that. So he was one of those really practical application type of Korean karate guys back when it was called Korean karate.
Hmm.
And he just started beating on me, just beat on me and beat on me, beat on me because I was single. He was single because who'd want to marry that guy? And we just guilt tripped out each other for about 3 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. And that's where I got my strong base. Now, when I was working out, he was constantly beating me up because, in Korean karate, it isn't pretty. You got to eat the punches like candy. And over time, it really, really starts setting in. Well, about 6, 8 months into this, of him pounding on me, I hit him real good. He went down, knocked him out for maybe a half a second, but he got up faster than he went down. He went, oh, time for weapons. So I started with a 3-sectional staff, and then the tonfa and the staff, and nunchuck and tonfa and sai. But when I picked up the wooden bokken, the wooden sword, I went, oh, very nice. And a year and a half later, I was in Japan at Nihon Taiiku Daigaku,
Wow.
practicing there with all the elites that were selected to go to that university. There's about 400 students that are part of just the Kendo team or the Kendo area.
Hmm.
And just imagine that in the United States, there's a lot of high schools. And every high school has a football or a baseball team, and every baseball team has a captain or some
Mm,
young ringer that does really well. All
right.
those people, strive to go into college, then on to professional. Well, in Japan, the people that practice kendo and judo, they strive just like that, but to just further their career as policemen or firemen or military down the road. But
Hmm.
it's to be the best you can be, you go to these schools. So all the captains of the high school teams, for example, that were selected to go to this university, plus all the upperclassmen, they were the best of the best out of 125 million people.
Wow.
And those guys, which were really nice, we won the war. It was good, but they didn't give me any quarter. They just beat on me and beat on me and beat on me until they could beat on me some more. So here's what a day sounded like at Nihon Taiiku Daigaku. You get there about 5:36 in the morning, and you work out, you work out, you work out, you work out, maybe lunch, you work out where you work out, you work out. 5 o'clock, the last big workout, 6 days a week, seventh day is tournament. So you
Wow.
can see how involved with this was.
Hmm.
So the Japanese people have a tendency to take the people that are talent and not burn them out, but just take them on to the next level, which burns out a whole bunch. Those guys became shoe salesmen. So
Let me jump in. Let me jump in
yes,
real quick. And by the way, throwing this comment back up there, Mr. Rick Rando is watching, and he calls you a
howdy.
legend, and he wants everybody to pay attention to your wisdom. And we're gonna get to some more wisdom in a second. And if you're watching live, I want to invite you to, come into the conversation, ask us questions. If there's something that you want us to go a little bit more into detail, ask those questions. If there's something, maybe you want to hear a different topic, please drop your questions or comments, and let us know that you're there. So, like, that was a lot of information to digest all of a sudden, but like you're talking about the training schedule.
Yes,
We in the martial arts industry have kids and adults that come into our martial arts schools, and they're happy to train, 1, 2, maybe 3 hours a week. But you're talking about training 10, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. I mean, imagine, how much your skill is going to improve in that amount of time versus, over the course of a year training, a couple hours a week.
yes.
How did you handle that intensity right off?
It was hard. It was really, really hard. The hardest thing, though, was to get down on my hands and knees and bow to everybody and say, please let me practice now. That was the hardest thing to do, to take off those cowboy boots that I wore, put them aside, get on my knees, and be as humble as possible in my late 20s.
Hmm.
So that was one of the harder things. But as far as physical, it wasn't difficult at all. The phone rings. No one ever calls. Anyway. So what happens is that when you're working out and you put in 6, 8, 10, 12 hours a day, depending on the day, you
Hmm.
have to take in consideration that all these guys have done the same since they were 4 years old, and their dads and their grandfathers were seventh or eighth degree black belt, or they went all back to the samurai era. The thing is that you have to remember, if your dad was a Heisman Trophy winner and you were playing football, wouldn't you have to strive a little harder and put in that extra time to be just like your dad or your line, your family line? So
Hmm.
that's what was really pushing them, because they didn't want to lose face. personally, the first 6 months were really hard just because I didn't get that much sleep. The latter part of summer, after I really was working out hard and I got hit in the throat too many times. In Kendo, they punch you in the throat with that bamboo stick. Well, after a while, and you're not born and raised with it, it starts creating weakness in there. So I came up with pneumonia. Can you believe that? Which turned into bronchial asthma. Put me in the hospital for about 2 weeks. And that was hard. Everybody says, stop this stuff, go back home. Go back to where you come from and just leave this alone because it's going to kill you. Well, you can't tell me that. Right. So there I was. I got out of the hospital, did all that, started, it took me about a few weeks to, get back on the ball again. And I found out that if I walked by a refrigerator and opened up the door, I get an asthma attack. So I had to start wearing a face mask like everybody's accustomed now. Well, just imagine in 1986, 87, I was wearing a mask with everybody else. It was normal as far as if you had a cold or whatever. And that kept everything regulated. They gave me medicine. This helped my lungs, screwed up my stomach. So I started running. And the first mile and a half was usually, and then it broke all the histamine, started opening up everything, and I could breathe really well. So what happened from there was, when I spar and practice and, went against the guys, I had to take my ki and triple it. So, because then I could breathe, because the harder you breathe out, you breathe in naturally. And with asthma, it's hard breathing out. Go figure. So over time of another 4 or 5 months, I got known as the Energizer Buddy because I never got tired because I ki-eyed so well. It's sort of like, you get an injury and you work twice as hard on the other side, and then all of a sudden you're a better hitter on the other side. So that really, really made a difference. And that base and foundation created my whole martial art ki and foundation and what do you call that? Your core.
Well, let's back up a minute.
Sure.
You talked about, coming from Arizona, I believe. You went to UC Berkeley. What was your childhood like growing up?
When I was a kid, I lived in Richmond or El Cerrito, California, near UC Berkeley. So I was born and raised there till I was about maybe 10. And I had a big brother. His name was Butch. So, this is a little bit older, So I was born October 5th, 1956. 66 this month. So anyway, when he was learning, because he was 5-6 years older than me, and when he was learning, might as well have me learn how to fall down the stairs when he throws me down the stairs. So I started doing that, and then then stopped it because that's the way life is. He didn't pursue it anymore either. And then I moved down to a little town called Encino, California. And lived there for quite some time and did everything where you are. And we left there. Remember the Tate Bianca murders? Charles Manson.
Well, yes, of course.
I lived up in the Mulholland area of Encino.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
My parents go, let's move to Scottsdale, Arizona. Okay, all my friends buy and, started a new world here. Now, my mom was from Arizona, so there was lots of people here. It wasn't like we came over here without an anchor. So that worked out really, really well. And then I just started at about, 14, 15 years old. I just became the cowboy that I never was.
And what kinds of things did you do in high school? What were your interests then? When did martial arts become, a real serious part of your life?
It wasn't in high school, even though I had a lot of friends that watched Bruce Lee movies, and did all that. I was just your average kid. I didn't get picked for a lot of stuff. A matter of fact, this is what I've learned through life. And you learn it at a young age because everybody that's listening out there knows. Everybody wants to buy one person a beer and then another person is not really seen. And there's everybody in between. I was one of those people that you really didn't see. And that was nice in some instances, but my last name was Abbott. So I was picked first for everything. So it taught me how to wing it. So being with a girl's name and the first name Abbott and being just, average size, it was just an average day in high school. And I graduated early just because school wasn't my thing. Got out early and started school again. Go figure. Yeah. So I didn't belong to any football teams, no sports like that. When I did do PE, because PE was still required every semester at that time, I was one of those guys that, could run 10 miles. I was one of the guys that you put me out on the decathlon and I'd sort of wander in second, like that.
Interesting. I'm just curious who's watching. If you guys have any questions, anything that we haven't touched on yet, please comment, let us know. Love to hear your comments and your questions as well. We're talking with Dana Abbott, and we're talking about martial arts. And you had a chance to go to Japan, and you
Yes.
talked about how difficult and challenging that was. What did you take away from it? And when you came back, what did you do with all of your knowledge?
Well, I took all my knowledge with me. And the bad part about knowledge is humility. I came back to America and I wasn't tooting my own horn. I was really humble about it. They go, "Oh, are you pretty good?" I went, No, I'm not that good. Like you'd say in Japan, because other people talk for you. So that sort of hindered me for the first year or two, because if someone says, "Are you good?" And I go, "I'm not too bad, okay, be fair to middle," and they would actually believe that. And it sort of let me go a little bit. But after I got my patents done, because I was basically working on my patents for the ActionFlex weaponry and creating a whole, I guess, niche in the whole martial art industry that was over in Japan from the 1970s. So I started working on that. I wanted to bring swordsmanship back to America, but you can't hit each other with bamboo all day long. No one will last that long. And that's the difference between martial arts here and martial arts in Japan. Martial arts is tradition. Tradition is hard because it's so simple and practical application. When you see anything fancy, it's a bad habit. So when I came back here with all this practical application, I saw people that worked out 2 hours a week, and I'd work out with them. And within 15 minutes, they have blisters on their feet because the wood floors would be too hard. Or when I did like these big, huge seminars, everybody's feet would be wearing out within 10 minutes because they couldn't wear shoes. But you can't wear shoes in swordsmanship because you'll rip off your tops of your toenails from so much getting in and out of your circle of influence, because it is a very fast-paced fight in real time. So coming over here doing that, now I could say, the tradition and the teachers, and I could talk about this and that, but really what they taught me was called ikioi, and how to maintain that through the whole process and then later limping away. So yes.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so timeline wise,
Yes.
when did you go to Japan? How long did you stay? When did you come back?
I went to Japan full time from March 1985. And then I left in 1998 with a wife and 2 kids and 60 kilograms of suitcases.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
about 100 pounds of suitcases,
And when you came back,
Yeah.
did you start working on you talked about working on your patents, and you talked about the ActionFlex system.
Yes.
Where did that fit in the timeline? So you came back in 98. When did
Yes.
you start working on that?
Everybody was waiting for me on the tarmac. So I had everything just before, when I was over there, I'd start working with lots of people, Black Belt Magazine and all those, putting ads in and everything like that back in the late 80s and early 90s. And that just worked in that way. Matter of fact, if I do a little side story, is as I said, I was the Energizer bunny there. And they thought everybody else was from America was too, because I was, a debutante, if you could call me a debutante with a girl's name, and for America. Well, they started saying, "Well, can you bring other Americans over with you?" And I go, "Well, let me try." So what I did was I put out these little ads in the back of Black Belt magazine, going, "Hey, you can come to Japan for free and train for free." Pretty good, huh?
Mm-hmm.
And then all you need is your basically sweat, blood, and tears to learn a good foundation, and the teachers will take care of you. People wrote and go, "Well, aren't you going to pay for my plane ticket because I'm a master? Aren't you going to pay for this because, I'm a master and I want this too?" So no one ever showed up. That's how, and I don't believe there's been another American since going to that university that I went to. So it was just one of those interesting times that happened. So put me back on track now.
Yeah. So, when did the patent, come
Oh, the
into
patents.
play, and when did you start producing the ActionFlex system?
I patented prototype 47. And it was very convoluted at one time, and the simplicity started working out. And then I was working on the patented piston system inside. So when I struck you with the weapon, a piston inside would move away from it, taking out all the pressure. Which means if I hit you really hard with like one of my swords or spears or stabs, it's going to hurt, but it didn't. But it still feels like you got tagged well. Because if you can put on a man on the moon, you should be able to make full contact weaponry where you don't have to dress up like a Siamese wicker cat and fight like you do in Kendo. So I started the patent in 1998. I got my patent out within less than a year.
Wow.
And started that. And just started going from there, just started getting a little bit more, got some employees, started getting that going a little bit more. By 2000, basically, we were pushing things out. I was trying to wrap stuff in weird boxes, trying to get it out for the first orders. And then by 2003, we're humping pretty hard. We're getting in lots of the schools. During the part, I had a newspaper that was about 30 or 40 pages, and we put those in all the boxes. And by 2005, we were just on it and just getting the point to do 7 figures in sales. And that's when all the big companies like Century and Macho and all those guys started coming in and taking market share with their own knockoffs. The difference is we have a Mercedes-Benz product, whereas most of the knockoffs didn't last more than 5 minutes, where ours was like a Zippo lighter, last forever. So over the next couple of years, I had my lawyers work with Century before I even showed face as much. And they worked out a really good deal where I had a 400-pound gorilla from 2007. And that helped me get out into the field more. And that made sure that I didn't have to worry about employees. And there it is. So they rented out my patents, and I still own all the rights and everything. But, we've been working together now for 15 years, 16 years.
Yeah, I can remember, one of the very first super shows that I ever attended. You were there, and you were promoting your products, and you were giving seminars and doing your thing. I think that was our first interaction. And yes, I've seen you there, ever since, and it's still going strong. I know that we use them sporadically in our school, just for some of our stick fighting, or some of our, some of our reality based training, and
Yes.
they last. I mean, they last forever. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing and a bad thing though, when something lasts forever though, right? Because then
If
they never
full
replace it.
contact weaponry, if it doesn't last, you'll get hurt. That's the biggest thing. Safety is important when you really got to make sure you don't want to limp away. So yeah, you got to look at that way. Now, we do have different versions. We have the B line, which is made for a lot of strip mall schools that don't want to spend extra money, but they want to get something with value. And like
Mm-hmm.
they have a bunch of parents and kids and they don't bang that hard. And then we have the Kudo Obi series, which is called the Black Belt series. And that's made for like yourself or me, where we can get in there and you can bang all day long as higher ranking colored belts or black belts. And
Mm-hmm.
then I have my hit series, which are Eskrima sticks, which come in two. There's a soft series and the hit series, which are just harder hitting. So if you want to go from teaching kids a screamer, a collie, or whatever, all the
Mm-hmm.
way over to the Dog Brothers, we got everything pegged. Then we got the Marine styles because, Marines don't want to hit like girls. So we have sticks that just hit and hit and hit. Everybody and his brother's calling me today. Jeez.
You're popular today. Hey, real
Ah,
quick, let's say hey to TJ Williams, TJ with the Kick Pod podcast. Thank you for watching. Let me know if you have any questions for Shihan Abbott today. And also, my wife is watching, and she said she had no idea that you could rent a patent.
you rent it out.
And
I didn't rent it. I had them rent it for me.
so, how does that work?
Well, you have to have a lawyer so no one falls back on things. And you have your lawyer do everything. And you just beat on your lawyer for a couple of years, and he'll say anything you want him to say. But basically, what you do is you just write it into the contract. We're going to go for a 5-year or 10-year that's renewable every year, like renting a house.
Mm-hmm.
For example, maybe you have it on a 1-year or 2-year rent, but after that, it's basically month to month. Or you might go year to year. It depends like that. So that's how we sort of worked it out. But since we make the best and it's always made well and ready to go, yeah, they've never had any qualms about trying to, come up with another model or another thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
if they want one, we just make it. Like 5 or 6 years ago, everybody was doing the sci-fi sabers. So we took a chokin longsword and we added color to it with a handle on it. So
Right.
we started working it that way. So depending on what someone wants. If a large group wants 28-inch, a blue colored hit series, a Screamer Sticks for the SIOC group, yeah, so be it.
There you go. Hey, and we got Daniel Groff watching. Good afternoon, Daniel.
Hey,
Thanks for
Daniel.
checking in. Daniel, if you have any questions, want to know anything about Mr. Abbott's experience, please drop your questions and let us know. Back on track with, we talked about the patents, we talked about the ActionFlex series. What we didn't really talk about was we talked about your training in Japan, but what was life like in Japan? What was living in Japan like for you?
Being a foreigner, you never forget that because everybody sees a foreigner. Just the way it is now. This was a generation, 2 generations ago. Now, it's different. But the only English I ever saw in Japan was the
Mm-hmm.
sign where it said information, and that was the only English. Everything else was in Japanese. Japanese didn't speak English. They can read and write it like you can read and write French because you took a semester in junior high school. So that's where their English came in. Junior high and high school. This is a pen. This is a book. What is your name? Things like that. So as far as communication goes, you really got to learn the language so you can learn all the nuances. Now, I had friends who were Japanese when I was living in California because after I left Arizona, I went back over to California for a while. Had a hankering to live in Santa Cruz, if you know what I mean. So anyway, over there, I ran into some Japanese people. And of course, when I went to Japan, they gave me a lot of introductions to surfers, go figure, and that worked out really well because there's surfing in Yokohama too, even though the waves aren't that big. So anyway, I don't surf too much because the water was always too cold for me. Yeah. But where was I?
We were talking about life in Japan, just being a
Yes, life in
foreigner,
Japan.
and
So with that thought process, I had people there that were friendly to me and went out of their way to do stuff for, like it used to be here in the US. Someone come in from Japan or somewhere, you bend over backwards to sort of help them out, and all they need to do is say thanks or work with you a little bit and you do it again. So the Japanese are like that. Plus, we won the war. There wasn't any race, there wasn't any prejudice, there wasn't any of this, that, and the other. Maybe a little bit when 1973 and 74 came around and the Nixon shocks, they call it the oil crisis, was called the Nixon shocks over there, where America just dropped Japan and let them hang. So the businesses were a little miffed about just getting dropped. You know, America said they was going to take care of them and they stopped. So the little people were miffed like that. And I remember, meeting older Japanese guys, because there's lots of World War II vets at that time, and everybody drinks. And after throwing back a couple, a lot of them come up, you're the first American I've met since World War II. Man, and I took a lot of heads, but you're almost Japanese. So, you'd run into stuff like that in Japan. But as far as the people were, the nicest people you'd want to meet. They'd really bend over backwards doing anything you could. And if you just showed any appreciation and learned the language and just put in the same feeling, because Japanese don't talk like this, like we're doing. They talk more with their eyes and feeling and moments and stuff like that. That's why if you see a Japanese movie, it's slow and there's no communication. There's a whole bunch of communication. Thus, I've been married to my Japanese bride for 35 years. We don't talk a lot verbally, but we have conversations all day long. And we are like two peas in a pod. We don't need anything else but she and I, because I play like I'm the Ronin and she's the Ronin wife. And we just sort of amble along in our lives. And it will live to see 100, because it's no stress. Because that's what you want to make for you. And that's what the Japanese taught. They said, you have to find your place. And if you find your place, you won't have stress. And everything, you'll start understanding the spirit of the thing in life. And these types of explanations are a little hard if you don't know what the spirit of the thing and how it will reveal itself to you, either in sparring, fighting, or in life and living.
Yeah, I wanted to say this, and Daniel, also congratulations on 34 years. That's amazing. You mentioned something, when we did our little teaser video for this interview. You used a Japanese phrase, and you told us that you would tell us what it meant.
Kenjutsu wo shutoku suru koto wa raku na michi de wa nai. There it is. And that basically is, Kenjutsu is a long, arduous path to follow. So, and the language, when they beat on your head with bamboo sticks, the language sinks in pretty fast. But the interesting thing about it is guys don't talk, women talk. So if you look at old thought process, if you took the kanji for women, which is like that, woman, you put three of them together, noisy. Men don't talk. They're all like Clint Eastwood in the Clint Eastwood movie. You know how he never talks and everybody assumes they all want to spar and fight? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if you can remember back in the 1980s when they had all that Japan bashing, and Japan would do something and America would say, well, da-da-da, and they wouldn't answer back. And they started bashing because that's what people just believe what they think they're going to believe. And just because Japanese don't talk that way. So I learned how to speak like a male, and males don't talk that much because they don't need to. They show what they can do. They prove what they do. There's no subjunctive future in their language, such as if I were a millionaire, I would buy a yacht. There's no such grammar there. It is what it is. And you've been a Japanese all these years and you came from this family, that Fargo, you're still in the same DNA. Me, I came from America. What do they see? A school teacher's face. You must be a school teacher. Just because that's what they see. So if you go here and you take a cross section of the United States, you see people, you think this person might do that person might do that, this person might do that with me or you. If you go over there, they just see you can do this and that because you can't speak the language. And even if you did, they wouldn't believe it.
Hmm.
This guy's not talking to me. Now, I don't know about today, but 35 years ago or 30 years ago, if I start spieling like this in Japanese to a couple old guys drinking some beers, they'd think they were speaking English all night.
Mhm. That's definitely a totally different
But
different culture altogether.
it is. But away from the tight kanji, away from the I have to be prim and proper. One beer. They just have to put alcohol to their lips, and then everything's null and void, which means you can act like a jerk, you can be boisterous, and it won't be held against you. That's why they drink a fair amount. And that's why if you ever go out with a Japanese, not an Issei from here, but someone that came over from Japan, and you have a hard time talking to him, for example, have a beer. They'll start talking because now they're not held responsible for what they say.
Hmm. Susan just dropped a
Yeah, there
comment.
it is.
Right? Americans talk too much about nothing and have puffed egos. I like the Japanese way of
Oh, it's
talking.
hard. And when I teach people, you try to talk to them a little bit. I'm not even talking about millennials yet. And you just try to talk to the average person or work with them. They instead of just doing it, they got to stop in the middle of the process and start talking like why they do it this way. So it takes them off a point of the thing they were on. So all they do in Japan is say, "Hi." Anything past that is just yes. So what happens is that they're so busy trying to talk back here in the US, they don't hear the simplicity of the technique.
Hmm. Well, I was gonna before that comment came up,
Yes,
I was gonna start to ask you about, teaching Americans or teaching when you came back from
yes,
Japan, and she brought it up, about the ego. You've worked in the martial arts industry or around industry professionals for many years,
yes.
um, and I think that we've both seen a lot of examples of the puffed ego, as she mentioned. Um, did you ever have a school in the United States, or did you do anything outside of teaching the seminars, or did you have a specific group of students that you worked with?
In Phoenix, here in Phoenix, I'm in the North Scottsdale area, but in Phoenix, when I came back here within a year, I worked with people. We had a school all dedicated to that, and that gave us the authority figure or the residence, the address to leap bound over to the throughout the United States.
Hmm.
So that's what we used most of the time. As far as my own students, I don't deal with kids, even though all the Chambada stuff and all the padded weaponry deals with children's stuff, and all the
Hmm.
programs in Japan that are mailed to the Department of Recreation are for kids. I went over there to learn swordsmanship. But you have to remember, you got to teach young kids because in a generation, you'll have someone else to spar when they get older. So you had to look at it that way a little bit.
Hmm.
So I went off on another tangent. Ask me that question again.
Well, so did you open your school when you came back and you had a school? Is that school still in operation? Did you continue to open more schools, or did you teach more on a one-on-one seminar base?
I always teach more one-on-one privately or go over to the schools. I used to travel all around the United States. I remember like 40 weekends a year, around the turn of the century up to about 2007,
Hmm.
2008, and just traveling around and around, just hitting all the schools. So what would happen is if you had a school of say 100 kids and you were the owner and you had five instructors and a few student instructors, I'd go over to your school and I train you on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And by the
Hmm.
time I'd finish, all your student instructors would be on the same book, the same pages, with the same length, and have their rote memory basically set in so you could start it on a Friday and they could be ready to teach it on a Monday. Because remember, practical application isn't that hard. It's all the artistic venue that might take 30 years. See how
Right.
that works. So that's how I really got it out throughout the United States, where now we're in about 70% of all the schools in the United States. Um, as far as me having a school where I taught like that, I would just I had a key to all the dojos. How does that sound? And Phoenix was known in 1946 by Robert Trias to start the first dojo back in America. And basically, this is a mecca here. There was at least 180, 200 dojos until this crisis came a couple of years ago. So, yeah. So I can go over to Ray Hughes's place, or I can go over to Tim Vandenhover's place, or I can go over to, another place and just work in there. And it makes it easy. Now, remember, I don't worry about getting paid because I was never charged there. So it's, Kendo's free. Swordsmanship is free. It's like you going over to, let's say, like you being here and you getting out of school and you become a coach, but you try to say, well, I'm going to teach privately to kids. It's too hard to find. You're going to have to teach them for free. And that's what parents do at the little league things and stuff like that. So when you're brought up that way, you got to look at it. Well, I can't make my money this way, but with the patents and all the ActionFlex and all the what do you call it, programs and everything we have set up just to a push to the finger, a push of the finger, everything is at your fingertips. So we have that all up. So if you wanted to do the same school thing, I have it down where you just push button, and it's all really, really reasonable. Really reasonable, because it should be. Because the more people that do it, the better sweat I'll get when I'm 70, because more people will want to pound and bang each other.
You talked about being all on the same page, and you've written some books.
Yes.
So talk about some of the books that you've written and what those, book titles or book themes.
Yes. The first book I wrote was Cutting Through the Mystery. And Mysteries was the second volume. The first one was, there is a book out, and it was written by Nakamura Taizaburo. You might have seen pictures of him. He's the old Japanese guy, maybe in the 70s, and he's in front of Mount Fuji, and he has this tatami mats, and he's cutting through a bunch of them. And you've seen pictures of that. And he's my teacher's teacher. So my teacher's teacher and my teacher were knighted by the emperor and that kind of stuff. Well, I took his book he wrote and I put a loose translation into an English version where people could read it the same way. Because when you read Japanese, you got to understand kanji because they're pictorials and you can get a lot of nuances. If you just talk Japanese, well, what did he say? Because if we're up in Kyushu, down in Kyushu, if we're up in Hokkaido, that same kanji is different. Try going to a Chinese restaurant and you know Japanese kanji. You'll get liver every time. So what was the question?
Did you write 5 books?
Yes, I wrote that one on that. So everybody could, the first one, so everybody could get an understanding and feeling how to put it into the movements. Now remember, swordsmanship isn't that hard. It's just another tool. But everybody tries to be some grand poobah. And you can't be a poobah because if you're too busy poobahing wearing a fez, you can't polish the elbow. Ureo Nigaku. Yeah. So anyway, the second book I wrote was a training and ranking manual for the long sword. So people had a rhyme or reason to follow. And then I wrote a short sword ranking and training manual, same about 175 pages with all the videos and all the links and everything that go onto it. So if you want to start looking how to do it correctly or the way I was taught from the big boys, it's easy to do. Then the next one I wrote was the instructor's training course. And that was the one we were talking about, the 48-hour or 72-hour training. Before it was called 48-hour training, but later I turned it into the instructor's training course because it brought in lots of different people instead of only the hardcores. And did that one, which worked out very, very well. Then I did with Fumio Demura, he and I did a book on games that dealt with the weaponry, because at that time he and I were working on the Kobudo weapons and all that. So we used to make weapons for his Genmai group. And for me, I was making their weapons in size and Tonfa and, Jute and all those kinds. a nunchaku, of course. And from there, we created all this where you can teach from the bottom up or the top down. And if you teach from the bottom up, teaching kids, not too many of them are going to last because they got to stand around. But if you take the ActionFlex weaponry, which my dear mother almost saw it too, is you put a bunch of chucks out there with helmets or short swords out in the middle of the group, and you say, last one to grab a sword does push-ups, and kids don't like doing push-ups, and they get out there and they just bang on each other and let them bang until they're a little tired because they do what they do. They saw the Blade, they saw Star Wars, they saw everything. So no matter what I would say to them, they're not going to listen until they're worn out a little bit. And then one goes, well, I can get a hit. Adjust your hand here. Well, I can't, this other person. Stand here a little taller. But I get it. Here, the other person. Okay, reach out and cast a little bit more. And then you start teaching that way. So kids are having a great time. What happens is that what they discovered over in Japan too is green belts, you become a purple or brown belt. By then you're just starting to learn weaponry because you're focused enough. Over there, you start off at the softer weaponry at white belts. By the time you're a green belt, you can handle a bow because you're working in real time and you know the focal points and the focus points too. Yeah. And then the last book, I wrote some books on fiction. I wrote one on the 47th Ronin. It's about an hour and 20-minute fast read for guys that you don't want to read love scenes. You just want to read fight kill scenes that set up in old Japan. Yeah. So I did that. And then I put all my relatives' names in it and stuff like that. Makes my kid and my mother-in-law happy, stuff like that. So I write stuff like that, but I take those books or that particular one, for example, and then they go through the fighting scene. And then I break the fighting scene down into kata and have them learn all that. And then have them place off of that and make up their own off of that so they can start learning fluidity and being fluid between the transitions. Because remember, in sword fighting, they're Japanese, they're not Italians, and they don't have any handwork or anything like that. You just, boom, it's done. And that's what got me really known back here in the United States was just standing there, tall, straight, and bang. And I hit the guy. That's where Junri, you know who Junri is. That's when he came up to me and started practicing. Dana, this is so great. I practiced Kendo in high school back in the 30s. And this was really, really great. I'm so happy. And he started working with us. So anybody that was anybody, it didn't matter what country they were from or what art they did. If there was a sword to see, they saw the simplicity that the Japanese tradition gave me.
What prompted you to write the books in the beginning? What gave you inspiration to write your books?
First of all, the first book was an authority figure. I learned that I was too humble at the very beginning. I should have gone in there and said, yeah, I should have been like a wrestler. Yeah, kick everybody's ass, but I didn't because no one did that over there. So I wrote my first book, Cutting Through the Mystery, and that gave me my authority figure. But one of the biggest things that got me out there was banging with everybody. I get out there and remember when you saw me over at Century or all the other different gigs that used to be around? Because there was a gig every couple of weeks, and I'd fight 200 or 300 people over a weekend. Just constantly bang on them because they can't stay toe-to-toe too long. And that's where all was mentioned. That's where everybody had puffed chests and fezzes, and they're sword experts, and you just stand in front of them and, you let them hit you a bunch of times because that's what you do. And then you go, okay, you ready? And bang, bang, bang. And then they get frustrated a little bit. And then we call those wood choppers because then they start swinging the axe as hard as they can. And then they miss even more. But after you hit, you turn around and walk away back to your spot, and I was constantly getting hit from behind. So yeah, there's a lot of really well-known people. Matter of fact, as you know, we all know each other because we've all banged together, and everybody in the art, real good people, really good people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Last question for you would be who are some of your mentors, and how or why did you choose them?
When I was a kid, I always looked up to my dad, but he trained me on a cattle prod. It was that era. I never got pregnant. No, 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 no. So he was really strict, browbeating too. So as far as staying a hardcore and not letting anything bother you, that worked out really well. If I was something else, or I'd probably bitch and moan about it, but it made me what I am today. And no, my kids do not know that lifestyle. They were brought up the Japanese way because they had a Japanese mom, and she said right at the top, "You treat our kids like my father treated them." So I did. Yeah, I see they come over all the time, and it's really nice. So, what question were we on? Who
So we were talking.
influenced me? Yes.
Yeah. So
Um,
you said your father when you were younger. So
yeah,
as
because
you
you
were
always
a
look up to your
teen.
dad, yeah, like that. But I didn't have anybody like I could name. I would see people that I would try to make myself like. What would I like to be? I remember in grade school going across the desert, I think between LA and Phoenix. And there's that military base there and a museum there. And I saw a 1-star general, I think it was a Marine, and he was so pinstripe perfect. Perfect. No gut, no this, and the other. And I go, oh, I'd like to be like that. I got my draft card for the Vietnam War, but I went worked for a bank instead. So go figure. So I've had those types of people that you want to look up to that don't even know you're around. I could say that if there was a TV person, Chuck Norris, for example, because he's always polite, and that coupled with the Japanese feeling of always being polite is that worked out really well. So as you well know, I can meet anybody anywhere, and they all say, "Hey, Dana, he's not a jerk, and he's a smart ass." I'm a smart ass, but not an unwell-meaning one.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So
Here's here's Rick Rando, I believe, for Kickmasters Karate, modern warrior for sure. He says, "God bless you." So
thank you.
thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Well,
So
listen,
yes.
go ahead. Yeah,
Oh,
finish up your thought.
other people that I would look up to that I have, because a lot of these guys that I see, they're 10 years older than me. They're a decade ahead of me. For example, there used to be Joe Louis,
Mm-hmm,
and I remember working with him when we used to do the Wounded Warrior gigs together. He was a great guy. He and I were two completely different things. I learned tradition. He was a Marine, but the tradition and the Marine came together for us, and
mm-hmm,
we got along really well. He'd slap the crap out of all the other guys, but we held our own. But he's someone that good shape. And then there was like Bill Wallace. He's still 75, no, 76 now. And he's in really good shape. So I hope I'm his shape when I get older. Less the splits. Can't do
mm-hmm.
splits anymore. But on the other side, I did it the traditional way. So as you see, no gray hair yet, no color, no nothing, no any wrinkles as much. Still in good shape because today at 4 I do spear fighting. Yesterday was sword fighting. Tomorrow is sword fighting. Wednesday spear fighting. So workout, hour and a half to 2 hours of hardcore workout, which keeps you going, but no injuries, no shoulders, no knees, no hips, no ankles. I have a slight limp, but I'm one of those cane masters, so I look good with it. So I took their advice and used my own judgment, seeing how they aged. So if you look at every other person now, the people that I like to work out with, like I remember Frank Shamrock. Remember Frank?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like him. He and I were at that Black Belt Hall of Fame back in the day, and hardly anybody came. LA, go figure. Everybody wears a cape there. So they never came up to the black. They held it twice. So he and I are there. We're in this big, huge room, and they have the rings, and he's doing seminars, and I'm doing seminars. And then we're sort of bored. And he goes, "Let's bang on each other." So I started hitting him with a sword, and he's just getting beat up, coughing out his lungs. And then he starts banging on me with his hands, and I'm going, "Wait, I'm starting to talk." But the cool thing was about it is it's nice, for example, with him that people want to work out with you and they're willing to look bad in front of others because it's the way life is. And then there's other ones that, you hit once or twice that they look beautiful in the movies. They look so good in the movies. But if you tag them once or twice, they in the movies, they're the greatest thing since the napkin. In real life, they must have hurt shoulders because they can't swing a sword out. That's what it is.
Hmm. Well, listen, I want to thank you for just sharing some stories with us, and I love your humor as well. It's just been a great time for this last hour. And if anybody has any questions, now is your last chance. Any questions that you want to ask Mr. Abbott before we end the show? But thanks for being here today and sharing the history of your time in Japan and how the ActionFlex series came to be and the books that you've written and just appreciate your time and your experience and sharing it all with us. So thank you.
Well, if you want to have anybody stop by the website, I made it easy. It's hard to spell samurai. It just is. It's called learnthesword.com.
Back to simplicity.
Hey, you have to. Or just take my name, Dana Abbott, put it in any search engine. If you can't find me, you weren't looking hard enough.
Very cool. Well, guys, thank you everybody for watching today. Make sure to tune in each and every Wednesday right here on YouTube. And we'll see you next time. Thank you again. Dana, hang out for about 60 seconds. I'll be right back.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.